Hey everybody, it's me, Angela Walters, and welcome to this week's live chat. I'm so excited to be back. Took a break for the holiday season and the new year. Missed you all, and super excited to be here. Real quick, if you're watching live right now, make sure you leave a comment because I have a giveaway for you. Jessica is here manning the chat. She will be kicking off the spammers and writing down your questions so I can answer them live at the end. So very, very excited about that. A couple things before we get into the live chat. I kicked off a new video series on Tuesday. Did anybody notice? Oh, I'm just kidding. I know you all know. So we started the Dot to Dot Free Motion Challenge Quilting Along, and been super excited. I've been working up to it to this point, and so it's so exciting when it actually goes live. And then truthfully, doing the live chat and answering your questions and kind of bantering back and forth is the highlight of doing that. So thank you so much for all of you who watched the video. And in this live chat, what I'm going to do is kind of recap or just kind of go over what that first video was about, maybe share some tips or pointers that didn't make it into the video, and then answer your questions. Now, before I get on my live chats, which are Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern, I get on about half an hour early and we type chat, and everybody come join. It's a lot of fun. But lots of questions already, and so I am sure it's going to be pretty question heavy, so I'm excited about that. If I don't get to your question, no worry, you can leave it in the comments. Other quilters will help answer it, and I get on there from time to time to answer it as well. So very, very excited about that. Let's switch over. Let me show you. It's funny, I haven't done a live chat in a couple weeks, and I feel like I'm trying to remember how I do all this. Anyway, so we're going to be talking about dot-to-dot quilting, but real quick, I do have, I'm not even on the right picture. Goodness. Sorry. There we go. So we're going to be talking about dot-to-dot basics, but I have a giveaway for you. And so let me switch back. Gosh, guys, I'm sorry. I'm like all over the place. So I'm do a little giveaway just if you're watching live. So this is what I'll be giving away, the pillow panel from the Luminous collection. There's 2 color options actually, so the lucky winner is going to get both colorways. All you have to do, like I said, is leave a comment and Jessica will pick one at the end. Usually whoever laughs the most at her jokes is the ones that's going to win. No, I'm just kidding about that. Anyway, so if you don't win, no worries. I have a promo just for this week. It is buy one, get one 50% off of the pillow panels, and that's with promo code WINTER because it's freaking cold. Now, I'm in Missouri, and I know all of you up north are like, don't want to hear it, but we're not used to quite such frigid weather. So promo code WINTER, and you get buy one, get one free, either color option that you want to do, mix or match, however you want to work it out. And to find out more about that, you'll just click the link in the description box below, or you can go to my website and get that. So good luck, whoever wins. Like I said, I'll announce that at the end of this live chat. And if you don't win, you still are a winner because you get one, buy one, get one, 50% off. That's also only good until next Thursday, so, or while supplies last, whichever comes first. And before we jump into stuff, just want to go into the upcoming events. Jenny Doan is going to be here for our quilt walk. That's our big annual event. We have a quilt shop here in Liberty, Missouri, just right outside of Kansas City. I know not everybody is going to be able to come, but if you happen to find yourself in the area, I hope that you will come. And then we also have a spring retreat coming up in April, so a little fun time there as well. So you can register for both of those and all the, well, you don't have to register for Quilt Walk. You can register for the retreat. Anyway, links in the description box below. All right, so let's get into week 1. I was kind of like getting to that because we have a lot to cover. First of all, as part of the video series, I'm quilting on a custom panel I designed for it, and I was super excited. The response to this free motion challenge and all the product has been overwhelmingly amazing. I can't tell you how much of a privilege it is that people would listen to me talk, right? That I get to do this for a job, but also support me by buying the products. That being said, it was so overwhelmingly great that we are still waiting on fabric to ship. So if you have not received your order yet, I am so sorry. I know you're probably excited and ready to get going. I promise these videos will be up indefinitely, and you can always pop back in on live chats. Even if we've moved on from week 1, you can still ask your questions, and I'll hit those as well. So thank you so much for your patience. I've said in other live chats, it's like me, Jessica, Joni, and Wendy. We pretty much run all of this. So you never know if I'm behind the customer service email or if it's Jessica, but I do appreciate everybody's patience on that. So anyway, just going to get that out of the way. All right, so week 1, when I put together what I'm going to talk about, like what's the dot-to-dot quilting going to be about? Normally, how I break it up in a class is I'll do the diamond design and variations, and then I'll do the starburst design and variations. But this time, I decided to switch it up. in this video, we're going to learn we learned the two basic shapes, the diamond and the starburst, kind of the foundation, and then we're going to build off of that in the future videos. So I'm anxious to hear what you all think about that little bit of layout. So if you're not sure what I'm talking about, it's a free video series that's on my YouTube channel and my website, quiltingismytherapy.com, and here's the schedule, and that's also on my website, so you can kind of see when to expect those videos, and as well as the live chats where you can pop in and ask any questions. So very excited about that. So in this video, we talked about, like I said, the diamond design and the starburst design. All of the dot-to-dot motifs and machine quilting designs that we're going to learn throughout this video series are made up of these two basic shapes, a V and a wedge. And really, when I put it in the video, I'm like, oh, they're going to think this is so basic and boring. But I promise, once we build off of these, it's going to be amazing the designs that you can come up with, how quickly and easy it is to do. So we're going to spend this video kind of highlighting that, and then in future videos, build off of it. Now, if you are quilting along with me on the panel that I designed for it, the free quilting diagrams will give you suggestions on where to quilt for each video. It's up to you. If you are like, don't tell me what to do, Angela, I want to do whatever I want, then you put your designs anywhere you want. If you need more of a guided experience, then I can definitely share with you some tips and rules to follow for that. So a question that has come up, though, was about thread placement and design placement. So if you're having a question about that, I'm going to kind of circle back to that, so you don't have to type it out because I will be talking about that. So the diamond design, that's the first one we've learned. And this design is so basic in how it goes together. It's actually really easy to teach. It's one of those that's maybe a little bit more difficult to perfect, but as far as the design itself, you can kind of see the path and how that works. So what I love about this design, it uses that V kind of shape where we're touching some corners of a quilt block and not touching others. And that gives us that kind of stretched out shape. Now, what I love about quilting that in blocks is I can come into a corner, quilt the block, and then move on to the next one. And so this idea allows us to be efficient with our quilting, which is always a great option as well. So when we talk about dots, when I say dot-to-dot quilting, it's kind of misleading. You might think of like a very ornate picture that you connect all the dots. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about reference points that we put on our blocks that we can then connect to create these designs. Think of it like a roadmap, a path to follow. And if you're a new machine quilter and you're like, I don't know what to do, you might find the dot-to-dot quilting technique nice and a little bit easier because you have that path ahead of you. So when you're working with this design, you can mark just the dots, you can mark the whole design out, or you can just wing it depending on how you feel about that. But the dots that we're using for this design are 2 of the corners of the block and then 2 points just inside the other 2 corners. Now, when I'm teaching or in my diagrams, I try to give like a measurement, right? About a 1/2 inch or 1 inch or so, but that space that dot is, inside of the other corner, it's just a whatever you like. There's no set rule on that. So don't feel like, oh, I have to follow that exactly. But once we have our dots marked, our path is memorized, or however we're going to go about it, then we can quilt that design. And starting at one point and coming back and moving on. Now, this is a great design because it works in blocks of almost any size. Small blocks, larger blocks, and for those larger blocks, if you want a little bit more quilting, you can add more echo lines and just add some more on the inside. So if you quilt a lot or piece a lot of sampler quilts, or you have a lot of blocks that have different sizes, this is going to be such a great design because it just adapts to so many different areas. Now, I said, the diamond design quilts that block, comes back to where I started, but if I want to move on, for instance, maybe I want to end up across from the block or across from my starting point, I can just simply quilt a straight line to the other side. That might seem like, oh, well, yeah, obviously, but it really kind of helps hit home the idea that you can play around with the arrangement, play around with the design to make it fit what quilt you're working on and your own preferences. So any of these suggestions I'm giving are more like persuasive arguments to make you love the design. A couple tips, there is that free downloadable quilting diagrams and tip sheet. So I don't know if this was in the free one, this was in the expanded resource. Those dots are reference points. They're suggestions. Think of them like speed limit signs, Okay, those aren't suggestions, but Eventually we're going to erase those dots and nobody's going to know where it was supposed to be. So I would focus more on keeping the line smooth than trying to hit that dot perfect. The graphic on the left just is an illustration. If you're trying to get to that dot and you end up with a curved, funky line, I think that's going to be way more noticeable than just keeping it smooth, missing the dot, and knowing, well, when I take those dots out, nobody's going to see it. Another thing that is really important, I wish I could just get this in everybody's mind. It's so stressful, I'm sure. You know, you're trying to quilt those straight-ish lines and you want it to be perfect and you want it to hit those corners perfectly. But when the block is quilted, what's most noticeable is the unquilted area inside the diamond, right? If you're using a thread color that blends in, I promise it's going to be fine. So please don't stress out too much about the perfection of it. I promise when you step back, you're just going to have that nice kind of overall look. Now, when I talk about you can go about the arrangement that you want to quilt it, you know, in that first illustration, I quilted the outer diamond and then the inner diamond, but you can do both of one side and then do both of the other. It's totally up to you. Really, it depends, for me, which machine I'm using. If I'm on a long arm, I might do one side first and then the other because it's less movement of the ruler. I know that sounds like really neurotic, but that's just what works for me. But don't feel like you have to quilt these designs exactly how I show them. As long as you get the desired result that you want, it's going to be fine. Another thing to think of is if I'm quilting multiple blocks, I can do the tops of all the row and then come back and do the bottoms. It's just a nice option to give me that same look, but quilt multiple in one long row. This is especially how I'd handle it on a long arm with blocks on point. So just think about when you're working through your quilts, after you get the idea of how the design goes together, you know, kind of think, how can I make this more efficient and easier for me to quilt? Sorry, I'm going to get a drink real quick. My mouth is dry. So in the video, I showed the moving on option where I could quilt a block, quilted a straight line across to the other side, and then went to the next. When you're going through your free motion quilting journey, you have a stage where you're learning the design, and then once you get comfortable with it, then you're learning how to adapt it to your quilts in the most efficient way possible. So if you see a quilt block and you might think, oh my gosh, Angela's amazing, look at that design. I probably picked it because it was more efficient to quilt for one reason or the other. So don't be afraid to, like I said, switch it up and make it fit your preferences. Now with the diamond design where we're touching two corners and not touching the other two, if you're dealing with blocks that aren't square, like diamonds, you'll get a different look depending on the corners that touch. And these two examples right here just show you that bigger diamond, I'm touching like the skinnier corners, and that smaller diamond, I'm touching the opposite ones. Slightly different look. But it just depends on what you're going for. So know that you can pick those corners depending on what, you know, the effect that you want. But with all the designs that we're learning throughout this free video series, where those lines go, your eyes will go as well. So if I'm looking at a diamond block, if I pieced that, chances are I didn't piece it well because I'm not the best piecer. I'm not going to choose to have all those lines come to a point that I've chopped off. So being aware that where those lines go is where it's going to draw attention to it will help you highlight or hide, you know, those unintentional piecing mistakes. All right, the reason I have the luminous panel is for the giveaway and the discount is I actually had a quilted example of that with the dot-to-dot quilting designs. And I love to show pictures of the designs on actual quilts or other types of panels just to, I don't know, give you more inspiration, more ideas, or maybe just to maybe more of a persuasive argument to make you love the design. So in this particular block, or this particular panel, let me go back, sorry, I thought I had a bigger picture. I have some shapes, some design, or some areas of different shapes, and I'm still using that same diamond idea, touching some of the corners and not touching some of the others. So you can use this in irregularly pieced blocks, like, you know, wonky blocks. You can use them in different shapes. So many different options for that. Now, next week's video, we're going to focus on this shape and do lots of variations. I cannot wait to get to that point. But at this point, during the challenge, I'm just wanting to get comfortable with the idea of trying to make it to those corners, trying to learn the roadmap so that we can build off of it. Now, the second shape that makes up the dot-to-dot quilting technique is the wedge, or that triangle. And it's pretty funny because somebody during the type chat before I went live was like, my first wedge wasn't symmetrical. I'm like, well, mine aren't either. This particular design, try to let go of the idea that all the wedges have to be the same size. That's not the important thing. Here, I'm just kind of creating a motif that brings your eye to the center. Now, the starburst design is going to be one that works in slightly larger blocks. So if I had to put like a number on it, let's just say 5 inches or bigger, just because I need a little bit more room for it to develop. I can use that diamond design in bigger blocks, but I'll start to get really long lines, which can be tricky to quilt. So this design allows me to quilt bigger blocks with smaller lines, even though there's more of them. So it's kind of like a choose 22 or a catch 22. The dots for this design are the center of the block. That's going to be our home base, the corners, and then the midpoints of each side. Now, those those marks along the outside of the block are just a guideline for help me place my wedges. None of the designs actually run into the edge here, but it's just kind of a good reference for me. Now, one question that came up during the type chat, in the video, I demonstrate the basic 8 stencil where I quickly mark that out. The question was, well, what do I use if I don't have that stencil? It doesn't matter. You can use any marking tool. I just need the center of the block. That stencil just help me find it a little bit quicker. Along the same lines of the stencils, will I be using any other stencils? No, that basic 8 is pretty much it. There are some other designs with line stencils that might poke out there, but none of them are required to make the designs. So don't feel like, oh, I don't have that stencil, I can't do it. All right, so with this particular design, the Starburst, I'm starting in the center and I'm quilting my wedges that fill in that block, using the outside of the block as a guide. Just like the diamond design, when it's all quilted, it's that unquilted area inside the wedge that's going to show up. So try not to stress out too much. Don't worry, all those points are not going to come perfectly in the center, but when you stand back, you're just going to see that, those lines kind of draw your eye to that point. So starting with my wedge and then working around, coming back to my home base, quilting that whole block. I like to go 12 o'clock and then go clockwise, but you could go counterclockwise. You can do in any arrangement. But the most important here is I want to make sure that the block is filled in as much as possible. I don't care if the wedges are the same size, if the corners are pointy. What I do care about is I don't have any big gaps in between the wedges that distract from the design. So think that that is a kind of an exciting thing. All right, so here we can see some quilted examples of that. We're going to see more about this design in week 3, where we learn different variations of the Starburst design. So kind of building off of that. But even though I kind of demonstrate it in a square and then in a diamond, it really works in almost any shaped block. I just need to pick a home base and use the edge of the block as a guide. Now, we're going to see this a lot more in week 3, but just know that you don't look at the design and think, oh, I don't make quilts with 10-inch square blocks. I can't use the design, because that's definitely not the case. In the video, in all my videos, I try to share some efficient tips or things that I find helpful. But I know that for newer quilters, it can be like, oh my gosh, I have to remember all this, and that's not the case. In the first example of the Starburst, I start in the center and I quilt that whole block, and that's great because I want to learn the path of design. But if I'm going to put this on multiple blocks, I might not want to start a new line of quilting at each block. So in the video, I just show one of my little cheating, we'll call it a hack. I think that sounds better, right? A quilting hack, where I use the quilting to get from the corner to the center, quilt my design, and then quilt right back out the other side. You might think, oh, there's a lot of lines right there, but there's so many lines in this design there, it's not really going to stand out. And here you can see the example of that exact thing. And if I do it once, I'll do it in other blocks, and then I'll just say that's how it's supposed to be. So just know that there's different ways you can get around that Starburst design. So I already kind of alluded to the free quilting diagrams, so be sure to check that out. There's a link in the description box, or you can go to my YouTube channel and watch the video, and there's a QR code. Those have the diagrams for the designs I show you, so you can kind of keep that as a visual reference. But if you need a little bit more help, a little bit more insight, you can check out the expanded resource PDF. It's like $3, and you get even more diagrams, more step-by-step, a little bit more info, just depending on where you are with that. So hopefully you can check that out. All right, so like I said, that was kind of a quick little basic, the foundation of this technique, and we're going to build off of it. But if you need any of the details, you can scan that QR code and it will take you to that. Now, if you're quilting along with me, I'm super excited about that because, that's the best way to get better at machine quilting is actually practicing. So be sure to check in on the live chats, get those downloadable quilting diagrams. You don't have to have the panel to quilt along with me. It's all completely free. Now, before I come back to the full screen, I want to show something real quick. So a question came up about which colors of thread should you use where. Can I show a picture of the whole quilt? So I can show a picture of the whole quilt, but I use different thread colors because I need the quilting to show up on camera. And so in the suggested supplies, if you signed up online on my website and got an email, it would have had the thread color placement. I will be putting that on the website, so you can just get that from there as well. And I'll also be putting design placement suggestions as well for the panel, should you want it. Again, it's totally up to you. You can decide, do you want to do it exactly like that? Do you want to come up with your own placement? Totally fine. So, covered 2 basic shapes, but sometimes you get to the actual doing it, and that's when the questions come out, right? The actual movement. So I do have a couple written down, and I'll answer those, and then Jessica will bring me the other ones. All right, Terry already asked about the stencil. What could you use instead of the basic 8 stencil that I show in the video? You don't have to have a stencil, just mark your reference points with whatever marking tool you prefer. I love the Mark Be Gone water-soluble pen, but truth be told, sometimes I just find the closest marking tool I have, so don't worry too much about that. But David had a great question. Should you stitch in the ditch first, stitch along all the seams, and then quilt the designs? You're not gonna like this answer, but it depends. You can do it before the design, you can do it after the design, but there's actually some of the variations that we'll learn that the stitching in the ditch is part of the design. So it depends. If you need a rule to follow, if you're like, just tell me what to do, then sure, go ahead and stitch in the seams before you quilt the block. That'll allow you to kind of get the whole quilt stabilized if you're on a sewing machine, or even on long arm, you can kind of stitch that block and then fill it in. But just know that it doesn't matter. You don't even have to do it if you don't want to. So it's one of those things like, do whatever you want. And you're like, if I knew what I want, I wouldn't be asking, right? So, all right. A couple of type chatters. I need to think of a better word. Type chatters just sounds weird, but a couple of questions that came up when we were typing before we started. Echo and some other people had trouble with the glide thread splitting. So don't you hate when you're like, I'm going to totally quilt, I'm going to get this thing done, and then the tension problems is such a frustrating thing. If the glide thread is splitting, it could be a couple of different options. It could be the needle's not the right size, so check and make sure that you're using the right size needle. It could be that maybe your bobbin isn't wound right. One of the things about glide thread, it's a shinier, it's not metallic thread, it just has a sheen to it. Just seeing if I had a spool real close. It's a little slick, right? And so if you wind it, here I found one, if you wind it on a bobbin, it might not wind quite right. So just keep an eye on that. If my bobbin is squishy at all, it's practically dead to me, because that bobbin is the foundation of your stitch and you want to make sure that's wound correctly. In my bobbin, I do use glide thread, but it's a 60 weight pre-wound. So, but I know some people that were typing were like, I like to use, more of a cotton thread. You can mix and match the threads that you use in your bobbin and your top thread. But I wish there was one set answer I could give you to help you out, but it could be a range of things. So Terry said, the fabric won't move like I want it to when I'm starting to quilt, right? So you put your free motion foot on there and you're like, it won't go. That's when you're doing the smush and push, right? So it could be a couple of different things. The main question was, will a Supreme slider help? And a Supreme slider is just a Teflon sheet that goes kind of on the bottom of your machine, and it does help, and I do use it, but it's not required. A couple things that will help you with that drag. Make sure that whole quilt is up. You don't want it hanging on the edge at all. You don't want it, pulling against you, because it is kind of hard to move that thing through there. If your machine quilting foot has an adjustable height, if you can raise or lower it, try raising it just a bit and see if that helps. You will know you have raised it too far if you get skip stitches, right? So you want to find that sweet spot where you can move the quilt, but you're not getting those skip stitches. Another thing that helps me is I wear gloves because I need that grip, but totally up to you on that. Another question is about the panel. So there's some black outline to some of the designs. The question was, well, how did I move from one design to the next? The way that I'm filming, it's so interesting because how I quilt a quilt when I'm filming is not how I would quilt it if I was actually quilting it. So when I'm filming, I'm going from block to block, and so I'm starting a new line of quilting at each one. I have several quilts that I quilt for this, but if I were trying to go from block to block, I would just quilt a line right over that black line. And I'll try to get a picture of this for next week's live chat, because if that thread is in that black area and you don't like the way that looks, you can take a fabric marker and color it in. So you can just scoot on over, you can tie off and start a new line of quilting. It's totally up to you. Question about tying off and on. So I'll try to get a video for that for next week's live chat. How do I start a line of quilting and how do I end a line of quilting? I tried kind of demonstrate it with my hands last month, and that's not going to help anybody. So just put a pin in that. I'll come back to that one. And then the last question I have, and then I'll take yours, Jex, floating my quilt tops. So for those of you that are long armers, so if you're quilting on a sewing machine, just ignore this. On the long arm, I do float my quilt tops where I'm not pinning the top to the leaders. So I'm letting it kind of hang down and float. I like to do that for a couple reasons. One, that's how I was taught, and so I've never veered off of it. But it's quicker. I don't have to pin it, and it allows me to kind of access underneath the quilt. If you have little kids or pets around your house, you might not want it hanging down. There's nothing wrong with pinning it. That's just how I do it. So the different options there. Hopefully that helps. All right, well, gosh, Jessica, you're still there writing. So again, I'm going to answer as much of these as I can. If I don't get to yours, I'm so sorry, but you can leave it in the comment section or join our Free Motion Challenge Quilting Along Facebook group, and everybody's very helpful on that. Do I sell the shirt I'm wearing? If I sold this shirt, then I wouldn't have a top to wear. No, I'm just kidding. Yes, we have this style shirt on our website, quiltingismytherapy.com. Oh, wait, it's on the shirt. It's so funny. I remember Joni, those of you who know Joni, she's our Build-A-Quilt maven. She was always asking for a 3/4 sleeve. And I always like the short sleeve. And she said, one of these days, you're going to be of an age. Well, you'll want the 3/4 sleeve. And I am of that age. It's long enough to cover, the hanging arms, but short enough that I'm not having hot flashes that kill me. So yes, you can get that one there. Do my rulers work on a Simply 16? Yes. So the rulers that I design with Creative Grids are just about a 1/4 inch thick acrylic. So they're great for high shank sewing machines or long arm machines. So yes, it will definitely work with that. All right. I'm having tension issues. Oh, I hate that. I'm so sorry. And have tried adjusting in both directions on my machine. Any other things I should check? All right, so if you're on a long arm, check to make sure your needle is in directly the way it needs to be. If it's turned even just a little bit away from the thread, it could end up giving you shredding. And check that bobbin too. I have done a thread needles and tension live chat, but it's been a couple months, so I might have to do that one again because it's a lot of fun. All right, what stitch length am I using? So I don't use a stitch regulator when I'm quilting on my long arm or my sewing machine. So my stitch length is organic. It changes. I love the juxtaposition of the small stitches next to the bigger stitches. No, I'm just kidding. So I'm not using a stitch regulator. So the speed of my hands or the speed of the machine is determining that stitch length. If you are using a stitch regulator and you're like, dang it, Angela, give me a number, do 10 to 12 stitches per inch. I'm just making that up, but. In the video, I did diamonds going away from me. Can I do them coming towards me so I can see where I'm going? Yes. But the thing about going in all different directions is sometimes you're going to be moving in a direction you can't quite see where you're going on that sewing machine. So at any point, you can raise your foot, rotate your quilt so that you can see where you're going, especially in the beginning when you're like, I'm just trying to quilt these lines and not pee my pants at the same time, right? So yes, you can definitely go in any direction. Absolutely. Are we supposed to have rulers? No, you don't have to have rulers to quilt these designs. In fact, when in the video, some of them I do without a ruler and some I do with a ruler. On a long arm though, personally, I'm using a ruler for every single thing because it's really hard to get that diagonal line right on a long arm without that guide. But whether you use rulers or not, whether you're working on a sewing machine or a long arm, you're aiming for straight-ish. And I kind of say that as a joke, but there's no such thing as perfection in free motion quilting, right? We just get it close and move on. Using a thread color that kind of blends in with the background of the quilt is going to kind of hide any of those unintentional bobbles. So hopefully that helps. Do I recommend stitching the black portions of the panel to make it look like it's a pieced project? Yes, it is so fun. So I had the panel quilted and I had it hanging up in the other room because I was taking pictures of it, and Joni happened to come in and she was just like, how? I thought you pieced that at first because I stitched in all the seams. So it does give that illusion of being pieced. You don't have to do it though. It's up to you. Will there be expanded PDF for every lesson? Ideally, yes. I'm kind of doing these the week before they're due. I've always been a last minute kind of gal, but my plan is to have an expanded PDF for each one. I think it's just a great option to have a little bit more content for those of you that need it without making it a requirement. So, do I use one color in the bobbin? Yes. It's so funny, the progression of a quilter, right? We have the way we do things and then we kind of change it up, but I do use the same bobbin color, especially when I'm filming. But if I am quilting a quilt, that I'm giving away, or just I might change the bobbin color to match the value. So if I'm using a light color on the top, I'll use a light neutral in the bobbin. But if you wind your own, then I would just go ahead and wind the same color. That's up to you. Do I always start in the middle of the quilt for best results? No. Really, when you're quilting on a sewing machine, you can start anywhere on that quilt that you want to start. Once it's stabilized, you can start on the corners, the edge, the center, wherever your heart desires. I usually, on a sewing machine, will start in the center because it's the hardest, the heaviest it will be at that point. That's where you have most of the quilt everywhere. So I like to do what's most difficult for me early on so that when I'm tired of this quilt, I'm not doing the hard stuff. On a long arm, though, I'm working my way top down. So you don't have to start in the center. If you are looking at your quilt and you're like, I don't know what I'm going to do in the center block, go somewhere else and get started and then come back to it. So it's up to you. Those are some great questions. And sorry if I was talking too fast. It's kind of a bad habit of mine. But really, as we're going through these designs, try not to get frustrated. That's probably the one drawback to doing a video class or doing the series. I can't sit right next to you and point to you and tell you to be nice to yourself. But as you're working through the designs, give yourself grace, have fun learning them, and I promise every time you work on it, it'll get better and better. And then, check out the live chats, ask any questions you have, and hopefully you will love this technique as much as I do. Because like I said, we're gonna see some really cool variations over the next few videos. So anyway, the giveaway winner, for those that are watching live of this one, is Cindy Hines. So Cindy, go ahead and email us at customerservice@quiltingismytherapy.com. Give us your address and we'll send you out a pillow panel in each of the colorways. So thank you so much for participating, for watching the videos, for liking the videos, for commenting on the live chats. I don't take it for granted that you would spend your time with me, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate your support. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Well, I'll be back next Tuesday with the next video in the series, and then back next Thursday for the live chat. So until then, everybody, happy quilting and stay warm.